Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. As we gear up for one of the most anticipated elections in recent history, all eyes are on the presidential race. But today we're focusing on what hits home here in New Jersey. Beyond the national spotlight, there are some key races shaping up right here in the Garden State. We are going to break down the candidates, the stakes, and the issues that matter most to the voters here. And we've got a lot to cover, so let's get right into it with our guests. David Wildstein is the editor of the New Jersey Globe. Micah Rasmussen is the executive director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. And Joey Fox is a congressional correspondent for the New Jersey Globe. Gentlemen, it's good to see you. It's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You too, Laura.
Thanks for having us, Laura.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with the U.S. Senate debate that we had between Republican Curtis Bashaw and Democrat Andy Kim. There was a moment in that debate that made national headlines when Curtis Bashaw experienced some type of episode live on the air. Let's take a look.
And I think that we need to make sure that we are dealing with affordability in a sensible way.
You okay?
That-
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we were all in the room when that happened. Curtis Bashaw took about a 10-minute break, then he was able to resume the debate. I was a little surprised, not only at what had happened and what we were witnessing, but he was able to return. So, David Wildstein, let's go to you first and talk a little bit about that headline-making debate.
I mean, first of all, it was scary for all of us there to watch this happen. We didn't know what it was. It was clearly an issue, and you know, thank God he's all right. And every candidate wants, especially a candidate that's running, a little behind right now. Everybody wants a viral moment in a debate. Curtis Bashaw, he got it. It just wasn't really the way that he wanted it. And Laura, I don't hope I would embarrass you by saying it. You really handled that like a pro. I mean, that was just well done, because we don't want a candidate's health issue to become a gotcha moment in a debate. And to have kept the cameras on and running and sort of going through that didn't do the public any good. It wouldn't have been fair to the candidate. And thank you for that, because you were just absolutely the pro that I've known for 25 years.
Well, thank you very much. Well, and that was the thing. We simply didn't know what was happening. It was best to take a break. And when he came back, he said, listen, I got worked up about the question on affordability, and I simply didn't eat enough. So, Micah, let me get your take on this and, how he was able to come back and if you thought he kind of recovered.
Yes, I do
on the
think.
campaign trail, that is.
No, I think he recovered that night, and I think he's recovered since then. He debated another time this week on Spotlight, and he debated the full 90 minutes with us. And so I think that's the best way to answer back any kind of questions that there might be. And so I think that was exactly what he needed to do. It was a scary moment. It was one that we will all obviously never forget. But once again, Andy Kim, just has this knack of being in the right place at the right time that allows him to show his human side. He comes over to the aid of Curtis Bashaw. He puts his hand on his arm. He asks him if he's okay. And this is really what we have come to expect from Kim. And we've seen really so many times is this human side of him. And so even though it was only a moment before you went to break, he really did get to express his concern in a way that everybody could see.
Right. It was very interesting from my vantage point. I was sitting a little bit behind them, and I could tell that there was something going on. But again, Andy Kim was over there before anybody could really fully recognize what was going on, and there was a genuine concern. Joey, let me just get your thoughts on it and your take.
I mean, yeah, it was an odd moment. It wasn't one that any of us were preparing for. And as David said, I mean, it was a viral moment too, and it's really unfortunate that is the viral moment that Curtis Bashaw got, because there's been relatively limited polling of this race, but the little polling that there has been has shown that New Jersey voters don't know too much about him. That 10% say they've got a positive opinion of him, 8% say they have a negative opinion, whatever it may be. But just these huge swaths of voters have never heard of the guy. He's never run for office before. He hasn't spent enough money to really get his name ID out there. And so the fact that maybe the one moment in his entire campaign that where his name really takes off is not really what he would have wanted to see, especially given that the rest of the debate was perfectly fine for him and for Andy Kim. It was a pretty standard, substantive, expected Senate debate where they both made the arguments that they wanted to make. I think both pretty successfully. Bashaw is a moderate Republican on a lot of issues, and he made that point repeatedly and I think pretty effectively. And for anyone who goes and watch the full debate, they'll see that. But we'll see how many people do in fact do that.
Yeah. Well, David, let's talk a little bit about, the real issues that they were able to address. What stood out to you? They certainly had a fiery exchange when it came to abortion and immigration. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think the abortion issue stood out. That, and this is one of the risks of being a Republican in New Jersey, is you have to win a Republican primary before you get to the general election. So Curtis Bashaw in the primary said he supported the Supreme Court Dobbs decision. Now he's running in a state where polling shows that most New Jerseyans are pro-choice. So Curtis came in and he said, I'm pro-choice. I'm a pro-choice Republican. And Andy Kim called him out on it and said, you can't have it both ways. You can't be for the Dobbs decision to give the rights to the states and then say you're pro-choice when a lot of states across the country are now making abortion illegal. And Kim kept coming back to that issue over and over, and that was probably the smart move for him. That's the issue where if people are going to be undecided at this point, that he thinks he can sway them.
Yeah, Micah, let me get your thoughts.
Laura, go ahead. Yeah, no, the other thing that Kim did, I think somewhat successfully, is he said, you talked about being pro-Dobbs before the primary when you were running for the Republican nomination. You haven't really talked about that since then. You have tried to soft pedal this. You just talk about being pro-choice. That's all you say. What happened to this Dobbs position that you were when you were seeking the Republican nomination? And I think he did that with some degree of success.
Yeah, Joey, let me get your take. Many times Curtis Bashaw would talk about how he did not think the government would have a right to stand in his way as a gay man of being married. Therefore, that's how he was able to kind of rectify his stand on that. So how do you think that played with the viewers, and how do you think it could play with the voters?
I mean, I think that fundamentally, Curtis Bashaw's identity as a gay man gives him some credibility on the issue of sort of standing up for rights that I'll phrase it from a Democratic point of view, like, the rights that Democratic politicians like to say that they fight for, and that New Jersey voters generally like to see politicians fight for. His identity gives him a little bit of credibility on that issue, because indeed, until a little over a decade ago, he was given fewer rights than his straight friends. So I think that could definitely be something that both appeals to LGBT voters themselves. There's never been an openly gay man in the Senate. But in general, it makes it sort of clear right from the get-go that he is not necessarily your average Republican. And I mean, going back to the Republican primary where he was facing a more conservative, more pro-Trump candidate, it was noticeable that was not a subject that he brought up quite so sort of enthusiastically when the electorate that he was trying to appeal to was the Republican primary electorate. Once that primary is over, it became more of an obvious benefit to talk about and to make it clear, that he is a different type of Republican than many New Jersey voters have seen in the past.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen on live TV. And David, I want to go back to the primary election campaign where we were hosting primary election debates. We had one between Tammy Murphy and Andy Kim. We offered one to Curtis Bashaw, and he did not show up. So this was the first time he was debating, and it was actually the first time that both he and Andy Kim had met each other. So can you talk a little bit about those dynamics and how you think he did? Because he did not. We showed an empty chair. in that debate.
Yeah, and that's an issue that candidates have to deal with, even long-term incumbents in safe districts. When you don't debate for a long time, or you've never debated before, don't ever turn down an opportunity to practice, because suddenly the stakes are high and you're getting there and you haven't done it before. And Andy Kim had debated in all of his House races. He did a debate with an opponent in a Democratic primary 2 years ago he got 90% of the vote in the primary, but he still did it. And it's just like an athlete. You've got to stay in shape for these things. You've got to train for it. And I think that set him back a little bit. But the reality is, Curtis Bashaw did fine in our debate, and he did fine in the next debate, earlier this week. And there's an authenticity to both of them, and you can't teach. And I know this from like my old days in a former life when I was running campaigns and recruiting candidates. And you can teach a lot of things. You can teach a candidate what to say, but you can't teach authenticity, and you can't teach charisma. And whether you agree with one candidate or another, and that's what these debates are for, is to present to the voters different options based upon how they believe. Because look, not everybody believes in the same things, but it's good when a party nominates two decent candidates, two people who are just decent human beings. And I think you got that in the Senate race.
Yeah, and Micah, can you give, for us, we are political junkies, we're always following this, but, for some viewers who might be just starting to tune in as we get closer to Election Day, New Jersey hasn't had a Republican represent them in the U.S. Senate going back 50 years, since the 70s. So, for Curtis Bashaw, somebody who's a developer from South Jersey, not really any political experience, to enter into this race, you never know how things are going to go, but this is a state that tends to lean blue. Can you just talk a little bit about the dynamics and everything that, he is facing, and just really what is at stake here?
Yeah, Laura, it's been since 1972, the last time a Republican won a U.S. Senate election in New Jersey. And so whenever I'm asked, what do you think his chances are? I start with that, because that's the prior, and you have to ask yourself, what's different about 2024 that all of a sudden is going to make it a more favorable election than any of the other ones we've seen for the last 52 years? And, a lot would have to change. A lot of the things that we have seen over the last 52 years would have to change. There's only one state that has a longer streak, and that's Hawaii. They've never elected a Republican to the Senate, since they've been a state. And so, again, we ask ourselves, of all the strong people who have ever run as a Republican, Bob Franks or Doug Forrest, or any of the folks who have ever run in the last 52 years, what is it that you have that they didn't have? Sometimes they had more money than you did. Sometimes the disparity in voters was not as large as it is today, almost 1 million voter disparity. So what are the conditions that are going to make it better for you? Is Trump going to do markedly better in New Jersey than other presidential candidates have done at the top of the ticket? And the answer to that is not in New Jersey, probably anyway. And so, again, we just look at what's going to change this year for Curtis Bashaw that hasn't changed for anybody else.
All right, we are going to take a quick commercial break, and then on the other side of the debate, on the other side of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the debates in the 7th and 9th congressional districts. Stay with us.
Hey! Nothing has ever been handed to me. I've had to work for it. On the field and off the field. Kane worked with me, guided me, helped me climb higher to get where I belong. To change my life.
Hey, welcome to the team.
Cougars climb higher. Kane University.
Welcome back to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones, and we are talking about general election, which is coming up on November 5th. With us today is David Wildstein, editor of the New Jersey Globe, Micah Rasmussen, executive director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University, and Joey Fox, congressional correspondent of the New Jersey Globe. Well, we've been talking about the race for U.S. Senate, but let's talk a little bit about another race going on, New Jersey's 7th Congressional District debate. That's between the incumbent Republican Congressman Tom Kean Jr. and Democratic challenger Sue Altman. Now, this is a race that is really probably one of the closest races in the state. It's one that is watching on a national level. And during our debate that we hosted, we had some moments that went a little viral. Let's talk a little bit about, and we're going to start with showing video from a moment when Tom Kean went silent after this exchange with his opponent. Let's take a look.
Yeah, Congressman, you just dodged the question. Mr. Rasmussen asked you a very specific question. Would you support deporting migrants? Yes or no?
We're going to let you finish your statement, and then we can go back to Tom Kean for a 30-second rebuttal. Okay, that is a clip that made it onto the headlines the next day. I believe it was 8 seconds of silence. Now, according to the rules, she wasn't supposed to be asking a direct question, but this was a debate where these two were really going after each other. David, do you think Tom Kean should have answered that question?
You know, first of all, this wasn't a medical episode. This is just Tom Kean,
right.
and you know whether people like it or not, he is probably the best I've seen. And I saw his father, and I knew his grandfather. Best person I've ever seen at not answering questions he doesn't want to answer. He is incredibly disciplined when it comes to staying on message. You know, I see where he was coming from, which is, you know, there's an opportunity in the debate for each candidate to ask a question of their opponent. That wasn't it. The questions were coming from the panel, not from his opponent, and he didn't answer it. But should he have just let eight seconds of blank airtime? Yeah, probably not, because what you saw was the clip. And the clip that you just showed is the clip that sort of went viral on social media of a U.S. congressman being asked a question and just staring into the camera without all the context. So he, you know, maybe, and by the way, the easiest thing in the world in politics is to do what I do, which is being a Monday morning quarterback and answer a question after it's already happened, after I've already had a chance to think it out. You know, yeah, he would have been better off responding and saying, you know, Ms. Altman, the questions come from the panel, from the moderator, not from you, and then moved it back to her. But he didn't, and that's the moment we got.
Yeah, Micah,
I mean, I think that,
Joey, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think that part of the reason that this sort of became a bit of a viral moment for Altman is that it's not really happening in a vacuum. This is part of her broader argument about Kean, which is that she says he doesn't do enough town halls. She says that he's not present for constituents. And then the specific thing that we experience as the press is he doesn't really talk to the press. You know, I'm down in Washington, and he has a policy of just pretty much never talking to reporters in the hallways or in really any other contexts. He turned down my request for an interview. He doesn't really release his campaign schedule to the public so people know where he is. That's the strategy that he has chosen. It's a strategy that he stuck with in 2022 as well, when he unseated a Democratic congressman. He's doing it again this year. That is, you know, what he has decided to do, and it is what Altman has decided to attack him pretty insistently over. And so right after the end of the clip that we just showed, Altman said something along the lines of, "Now I know how the reporters feel." That was like her little quip about the silence.
Yeah, Micah.
It wasn't just sort of this one moment in a debate. It's part of a narrative that Altman is building about, I'm present for you, I'm standing up, and the congressman falls silent, basically.
Yeah, and Sue Altman hasn't held a public office before, whereas Tom Kean has been a member of the legislature, member of the Assembly, Senate, also a member of Congress. So, Micah, when it comes to prepping candidates, and you worked for Governor Jim McGreevey, can you talk a little bit about what's going into this and how you thought, Sue Altman, really kind of a novice, came out. She looked really, really quite composed, and she did really, really well. And it almost made Tom Kean, even though we know his strategy. Some people might have been like that. He didn't seem like he seemed like he was phoning it in. Was the comment I got from some people, or that he wasn't there.
Well, there's two ways to practice, or there's two things that you want to practice. One is being familiar enough with the issues, right? One is really studying up and knowing the issues. And so that's one thing that's a particular challenge for somebody who's a challenger, who doesn't eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff 24 hours a day. You gotta bone up on the issues. And so that's part of it. But the other part of it, and this I think tends to be dismissed by a lot of people who say, well, I'm out there every day, I'm talking to people, I'm doing the things that I'm doing, I don't need to spend a lot of time practicing, right? So it tends to get short shrift. And this is everybody from incumbent presidents on down, right? You'll remember President Obama in 2012 got beaten pretty handily in the first debate by Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney just came in and had prepared and had all the lines practiced and that he wanted to make, and he scored them all. And Obama didn't. And so preparation matters, strategy matters, having those lines that you want to convey, that you want to get across, having those at your fingertips in your command that you don't forget about them matters. So it's not just familiarity. People say, well, I'm the incumbent president, I know the issues. Yes, you do, but that doesn't mean that you're prepared for this debate. And so you really want to spend time drilling down on the 5 or 10 things that you want to get across over the course of the 90 minutes.
Yeah, and there was a bit of a lighter moment, more of a fun moment. David, you asked the candidates to respond to a series of questions with just a thumbs up, thumbs down. We're going to take a quick look and then get everybody's response to that.
Joe Biden was the fair and legitimate winner of the 2020 presidential election. Phil Murphy has been a great governor for New Jersey. I'm looking forward to another 4 years of Donald Trump in the White House. My party has done everything possible to help me win this election. There are people currently serving in the U.S. House of Representatives who are worse human beings than my opponent. There is extraterrestrial life on a planet beyond Earth.
Okay, that's when they really showed some personality. David, why did you add this section to the debate? It went really well. Some were skeptical. Some were skeptical.
Yeah, and there were some disagreements. There was some common ground. I mean, who would have thought that Tom Kean, believes in life on another planet? I mean, and they showed some, what I thought was interesting is not just where they wound up, but in some cases how long it took them to get there. Sue Altman paused before she said Phil Murphy's been a great governor.
Joey, what'd you think?
The fact that the candidates were sort of willing to just go with it was obviously made it good. And I think also, it's a round that requires very specific questions. I think that if we had tried to include questions that had been either more of a gotcha type question or questions that genuinely require, a minute's worth of explanation to make an answer meaningful, then it wouldn't have really clicked. Yeah. But when it comes to answering things like, the 2020 election was free and fair, you could talk about that for a whole minute. Or you could just say, yeah, it was. And you've got two candidates here who both agree that, yes, it was. Tom Kean Jr. is not a stop the steal Republican. He's not the type of Republican who's going to go down that rabbit hole. So it was good to get them in sort of a very definitive position on some of these issues.
Yeah, one other thing I want to jump to, and we only have just about a minute or so left, is the other congressional debate that we hosted. That was in the 9th Congressional District, the seat held by the late Congressman Bill Pascrell, who passed away, and that is between Nellie Poe, state senator, and Billy Primpa. Let's just get your thoughts on that. Let me go, David Wildstein. This is a race where Nellie Poe, because of the timing of when Congressman Bill Pascrell passed away, party insiders more or less picked who that they were going to get to have that seat. Can you talk briefly a little bit about that?
Yeah, this just it's a sad and odd situation where an incumbent congressman died in August, and he died a week before the deadline to replace the candidates. And Senator Poe got in that race very quickly. She beat two other hugely competent candidates at a convention, and this is a Democratic-leaning district. And these two candidates, Billy Prempa, a very conservative Republican, was making his third run against Bill Pascrell. Now it's a new race for him, and these two are, this is a liberal and a conservative. This is a choice between very much right and very much to the left, and voters have a choice to make now about who they want to be their next congressman. This seat's been, this is the first new congressman since the 1990s.
Micah Rasmussen, I'm going to give you the final word here on this and this show today too.
This was another one where neither candidate had debated before, and I thought maybe neither one was as polished as they could have been because it was something they were not used to. In Poe's case, she's been in office a long time. She hasn't done this before. She probably didn't need to accept this invitation, right? She's in a somewhat safe district, but she did. She played along. I thought she made all of her points. She certainly didn't do any damage to herself. Prempa came out and he made a lot of the ideological points that he really believes in. I don't think anybody really helped themselves or hurt themselves, but it was a good thing that you give the voters the opportunity to see more about you, to learn more about you. And that's really what we're trying to do here with these debates.
All right, well, that is going to have to do it today. Joey, Micah, David, thank you so much for your time today. And we thank you for watching as well. I'm Laura Jones. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.
Some of the biggest challenges I face as a student athlete is managing my athletic work and my schoolwork.
To prevent our student athletes from falling into academic distress, we created a program called Gamer. Each team works with an athletics academic liaison to increase graduation and retention rates.
The turning point that I saw is my grades went up.
What has helped me the most is definitely tutoring. My academics have just skyrocketed.
The ultimate goal is for our student athletes to have that championship moment on the field and day of graduation.